with this House member.
This House is in session. I wish to welcome Dontier Woodle, a former student at Foundation School, and his mother, Shanice Baker. I hope you, both of y'all, enjoy. I hope both of y'all enjoy today and see what goes on in the People's Parliament. I welcome you once more. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, November 15, 2022 to be confirmed. Honourable Leader Government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
Questions that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed.
Announcements by Your Honor, the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the President. Petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Leader Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. Government business, the order of the day.
Order number 6, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, to move the passing of a resolution to rescind the resolution passed by the Honourable the House of Assembly on the 23rd day of June 2015 and the Honourable the Senate on the 8th day of July 2015, assented to by Her Excellency the then Governor General, now President, on the 28th day of July 2015 and published in the Official Gazette as Resolution number 20 of 2015 on the 3rd day of August 2015, approving the lease to the Rotary Club of Barbados South of a parcel of land, then the property of the Crown, now property of the state, situate at Garfield Sober Sports Complex, Upton in Parish of Christchurch in this island, for the construction and development of a recreational facility for children with disabilities.
Honourable Member St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning to everyone. It's indeed a pleasure to introduce this resolution to rescind the lease to the Rotary Club of Barbados South. But, Mr. Speaker, we wish to do a cognate debate, not only to rescind the lease to the Rotary South, but also to grant the lease to the Rotary Inclusive Player Trust. And reason being, Mr. Speaker, we move to rescind the decision to grant the lease to the Rotary Club of Barbados South. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My error. I beg for permission. I'm seeking your permission to do a cognate debate. There are linked, there are two of the same resolutions, one to rescind and then one to grant the lease to the 6 and 7 in a cognate debate.
Order 6 and 7.
Yes. My apologies, Mr. Speaker, for not requesting permission in this Lord Chamber to do this resolution as 6 and 7 as a cognate debate. And 6 pertains to...
Continue to speak. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And 6 pertains to
6 pertains to the rescinding the lease to the Rotary Club of Barbados South, and 7 pertains to the lease of the said property to the Rotary Inclusive Play Trust. And I will begin with the explanation.
The question is that Order 6 and 7 be debated as a cognate debate in that they are inextricably linked. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. Continue, honourable member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my haste to explain, I would never want to breach any of the standing orders in this Lord Chamber. And I thank you for the...
Honourable member will not allow you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the guidance, and indeed, thank you for the patience as well. But, Mr. Speaker, in the excitement to get this debate going, because this is indeed a very important debate, and the whole aspect of rescinding the decision to grant the lease to the Rotary Club of Barbados South of some 25,000 square feet of land at the Garfield Sobers Sporting Complex, and then to ask that we then grant the lease of the said land, 25,000 square feet of land, to Rotary Inclusive Play for the establishment of recreational facilities for children with disabilities. And perhaps that's the haste and why I want to get the debate going, because back in 2010, the Rotary Club of Barbados South made a request to lease the land of 25,000 square foot of state land at the Garfield Sobers Sporting Complex, Wildy, on a long-term basis. But the club's goal was to create a facility that will include a recreational center, specialized swimming area, and a playground outfitted with specialized equipment that would be suitable for children with disabilities. And the Rotary Club of Barbados South was of the view at the time that as we as a country, as we seek to build out a society that is embracing of persons with all abilities or different abilities, it is important that we begin to cultivate at the time the appreciation for children from an early age to ensure that they grow up to be adults who celebrate not only diversity, but welcome people of all backgrounds and abilities in their lives. But, Mr. Speaker, the identified goal was in creating this facility to have children of all abilities play and learn together. Imagine, explore as one in an environment where they share common experiences, as opposed to in an environment where they focus on different abilities and they recognize they themselves are not disabled and some are disabled, but that they share the commonalities and the common experiences and make a lasting impression of the environment and of the need to embrace each other as young children, so that the Barbados that we see today and that we as parliamentarians seek to foster an environment where every single person in our society is recognized as adding value to this society, whether you're differently able or you're able. So the Rotary Club of Barbados South, and in introducing the resolution, was approved by the House of Assembly back in 2015 in June, and then it was approved in the Senate in July 8th, 2015, and by the Governor General on July 28th, and it was published in the Official Gazette on August 3rd of 2015. But Mr. Speaker, during the preparation of the formal lease to the Rotary Club of Barbados South, and hence that's why we have to rescind the decision, it was recognized that there was no registration for the Rotary Club of Barbados South. When the Ministry of Lands and Rural Development at the time went to prepare the lease, they found out that there was no organization registered named the Rotary Club of Barbados South. But there was an entity named the Rotary Inclusive Play Trust. And hence, if we had left what transpired in 2015, we would have been misleading not only the Lord Chamber, but the public of Barbados. Hence, the request to do it as a cognate debate. It's the same land, it's the same place. It's just the Rotary Club of Barbados South is not a registered organization, and the Rotary Inclusive Play is a registered organization, and that was the error. But this stayed for some years, and we, as a government, when we came to office in 2018, we approved what was done by the Cabinet of Barbados in 2017 on the last administration to rescind the decision and to lease the land to the Rotary Inclusive Play. So we re-ratified what was done in 2017 when we came to office in 2018. There was a little lapse in time because the Rotary Club of Barbados South in May 2022 confirmed of their interest still in leasing the land for the Inclusive Play project, and we agreed to. But, Mr. Speaker, let me move on to the work of the Rotary Club. And, you know, being a Rotarian, and I pride myself of being a Rotarian, but this was the vision of one man by the name of Paul Harris that started back in 1906, February, where he saw the need to facilitate the exchange of ideas and interests and forging friendship among professionals with diverse backgrounds. And 6 years after the Rotary International, or the Rotary Club, was formed in Chicago in April of the year 1912. The vision basically at that time was to forge interest and friendship among professionals of diverse backgrounds where they can exchange, I guess, some of the challenges and some of the good practices and focus on making the world a better place. But over time, this vision evolved into humanitarian service, and with its members having a long-time track record of addressing challenges in communities and around the world, humanitarian service became the order of the day of the Rotary Club, the Rotary International. And, you know, when I speak about Rotary, there is something called the 4-way test in Rotary. When you join Rotary, you have to learn the 4-way test. And when I came to public life, and I remember the 4-way test, you know, there is tremendous synergy and also the work of what we do as parliamentarians and politicians and what Rotary International and Rotarians engage in. And I will repeat the 4-way test in this Lord Chamber. The first tenet of the 4-way test: is it the truth? That's the first tenet. Is it the truth? Then it goes on, is it fair to all concerned? The third tenet, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And the fourth one, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And if you truly internalize the tenets of the four-way test, you'll see we as parliamentarians, we as a government, we try to live by these tenets. In terms of trying to be fair to all concerned, when we engage in legislative rollout, the legislative agenda of this party, of this government, we try to be fair to all concerned because we factor in stakeholder involvement, stakeholders' input, stakeholders' recommendation. And we try to build goodwill among our citizens, not only our citizens, but across the region. And we engage in policy initiatives that will benefit all parties concerned. So we, in essence, as parliamentarians and politicians and a cabinet, we try to live by the four-way test. And indeed, I am one of the persons when I came to public life. This was one of my barometers, the four-way test, as to how I engage with people. And the motto of the Rotary International is service above self. We put service above self. If you ask each and every single one of the parliamentarians in this lower chamber and also members in the Senate, they will tell you service above self. And similar, there's one of our colleagues, the member for St. Michael South, whose motto is people over politics. And basically that is what he is in essence saying in his motto. And most of us, when we coin phrases to define our charter as members of parliament and persons who represent people in the various constituencies across Barbados, that is what we are saying to the people, that we put service among ourselves. Many of us sacrificed careers, some had lucrative careers, and came to public life. And we ask ourselves, you know, persons, the most common question someone will ask you if you travel across the length and breadth of this country, why did you enter politics? Why did you come to public life? And I'm certain when we answer, and I don't be there with each and every one of you, but most of us answer and said, we are putting service above self. Because if we truly were putting self above service, I saw there are other things that we can do to generate income that is way beyond what we are paid. So it is not about money for us, but it's about service to the people of this country. And that motto, service above self, the Rotary motto, is one that I hold dear. Still a Rotarian, even though my Thursdays are taken up doing other things and what we call more important things, executing the work of Rotary actually. But as a member of cabinet, I execute that work. And I want to say to those who are listening, service clubs in this country, whether Rotary, the Lions, Kiwanis, they play a fundamental role in building out Barbados. And there are 7 pillars that I wish to mention of Rotary. Rotary Club execute work to protect the environment. Actually, from the 1980s, we know prior to the 1980s, Rotary focus was on eradicating polio across the world. And one of the reasons why I joined Rotary, because I like the work and I like the vision of Rotary. I grew up in a household with a cousin the late Evadne Sutherland, my first cousin, my aunt's daughter. We grew up in the same household in Ellerton, St. George. And she was a victim of polio, suffered from polio. That was her disability. She migrated to Canada in the late 70s to be with her mother, my aunt, who's still there. She's deceased now. And some of the areas that I will mention with respect to persons living with disability. She died in her early 50s, and I frequented Canada because we grew up together, and I would go on vacations sponsored by my dear aunts, some who are no longer with us, but some who are still there. And one of my aunts, she was a nurse, she's retired now, she's still alive, and she would say that Evadne's lifespan is a shorter lifespan than the average citizen, person without disabilities. Because she had polio and she was very inactive, but she would try to walk with her crutches. It did not stop her learning ability, because she did the common entrance. She sat the common entrance back in the 60s. No, back in the 70s, sorry. No, yeah, early 70s, because she left right after she passed for St. Michael's School. She gained entry into secondary school at St. Michael's. So she had no learning disability. And I take time to mention this because you have to know certain things about persons with disability to really appreciate what we're doing. Not that you experience it, but you have to understand it. And I'm taking time to explain to people who are not within these hollow chambers to understand, using myself and as an example to get into the whole debate about persons with disability and the role of this recreational facility for persons with disability. And my aunt would often say to us, in her absence, her lifespan will be a shorter lifespan. Not saying that we all wouldn't pass away from some illness, but the average lifespan of an inactive person who can't engage in recreational activities, sporting-wise, is often challenging. But having said that, she had great intellect. She was trained in the area of information technology. She rose to become a manager in her firm, and she drove a car. All of the levers were in the handle. There was a connection between the braking system, which are usually manufactured to be utilized by the foot pedal, brake, and accelerator. They were all connected to the steering wheel, where she can use her hand to slow the car down, speed the car up. And I'm taking time to explain that and using my experience in the Sutherland household with someone with disability. First time you are hearing me explain this, and you don't often, speak about what you went through or going through, because you think persons may want to have sympathy, and you don't want persons to be having sympathy as leaders to you, but for you. But to explain this is to let you know that persons with disability can indeed function in this world. She picked me up from the airport many times in Canada with her car, and she drove briskly, swiftly. And indeed, we joked about it, and she often boasts that she can drive better than me. And of course, driving in those cities, the big cities, is often sometimes more challenging than navigating our smaller roads. And indeed, I am proud to say that she lived until age 55 or 56, but she enjoyed a good life. She went to work daily, she earned a living, She bought a home, she bought a car, and she was able to enjoy a professional career in information technology, just like most of us in these chambers here. So that's my living example that I wanted to share with you as I get into the whole work of the Rotary, the 7 pillars, and I mentioned protecting the environment, and I mentioned Rotary back in the 1930s and the 1940s. The thrust was on eradicating polio and hunger across the world. But they had other tenets. Growing local economies, that's pillar number 2. Pillar number 3, saving mothers and children. Pillar number 4, providing clean water, sanitation, and hygiene. Pillar number 5, they fought diseases. They continue to fight it. Pillar number 6, they promote peace. And pillar number 7, they support the education. So the majority of the work done by the Rotary Club across the world are similar to what we do as a government and a not-for-profit organization. I take my hat off to the Rotary Club of Barbados, the Rotary Club of Barbados South, and the Rotary Club West. Those are the 3 organizations in Barbados. The Rotary Club of Bridgetown, that was formed, I think, back in the 1960s or the 1970s, and then in the 80s, the other 2 Rotary Clubs were formed. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Rotary International is the world's first service club with more than 1.2 million members in across 330 clubs worldwide. The Rotary has spent internationally over $80 million on eradicating polio across the world. And I mentioned the mottos of Rotary International. One of the mottos, service above self, but there is another motto: they profit most who serve best. And that conveyed the philosophy of the unselfish volunteerism of which the organization is all about. I'm taking time to mention this to you because we as a government cannot build a just and equitable society on our own. We as a government cannot build a society where persons of different abilities are indeed empowered. We cannot do it on our own. So the work of the Rotary across the world, and in Barbados, I heard some of my colleagues reciting some of the work Rotary did in this island for years, in education, in promoting peace, in dealing with the vulnerable, similar to this one, addressing the plight of persons with varying disabilities, autism, ADHD, dealing with work where mental challenges present tremendous obstacles, dealing with work where persons have been stigmatized and polarized and placed in certain boxes. We mentioned the whole issue of mental health that include attention deficit, anxiety, and depression. And when you look around today, only recently we heard our Prime Minister speaking about the increasing cases of persons with mental health issues. When I was in that other ministry that the member for St. John now has full responsibility for, Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment. One of the speeches that I made when I first went to that ministry, and I recall that mental health challenges will become, mental health issues will become one of the major challenges that we will face among working class people. And I said that coming out of COVID, or during COVID. And we recognize that these anxiety deficits, attention deficits and anxiety and depression are even more prominent among children and youth with disabilities, especially those that are brain-based or neurodevelopmental, as the doctors would articulate it in the way that is intended to. Those sicknesses such as what they call disabilities, such as autism and ADHD. And if we understand these challenges, then we understand the role that this resolution is seeking to put before the chamber and the people of this country, that from an early age, inclusivity, to include persons with these disabilities, to play with and among persons who don't have disabilities. Because the recreational facility or the purpose-built facility will not only serve persons with disabilities, but it will allow those able-bodied persons, the young children, young teens, to mix and mingle with those persons who are differently able. And it gives them a sense of understanding from an early age that we should not discriminate, stigmatize, or polarize persons who are differently able in whatever form it is. Mr. Speaker, the current epidemic of obesity associated with inactivity is furthermore a local health concern for all children. And you will recognize, Mr. Speaker, there is an element of emotion as I speak, because, and I don't want to keep referencing it, but my cousin was very inactive, polio, and what she died from was a result of inactivity, health concerns as a result of inactivity. And our aunt recognized it from an early age, and that's why those words, her lifespan will be shorter than ours, were used in her absence at family gatherings, because she was always the life of the party. And she suffered from a case of obesity that impacted her health in a major way. So, Mr. Speaker, this debate is real as I seek to go through some of the challenges, and I will try to bring real-life examples, and I know members within this chamber who will speak after me and who are probably more trained in the area and who are probably more educated in the area than I am, would even bring more, I call it respectability, and I would say educational insight to this debate when I'm finished. Is increasingly, for children with diabetes, to be sedentary, placing them at higher risk of obesity and associated health conditions. But it has been recognized, Mr. Speaker, and members in this chamber, that sporting and physical activities are just as important for persons with disabilities, and I would say even more important with persons with disabilities as they are to the average person. And several work by NGOs would show that there is a connection between physical exercise and brain health. Not only on the basis of fitness, but also for the health of developing the brain of children with disabilities. And Mr. Speaker, as I speak, you see elements of the reasoning why this project is so critical to us in this country and persons with disabilities. It is a documented fact, Mr. Speaker, that physical activity can contribute to better cognitive performance, better memory, the ability to enhance problem solving and decision making. Active children have better executive functioning and ability to perform tasks. As simple as playing a game or engaging in a workout or activity can improve the capacity to focus in children with disabilities. So, Mr. Speaker, I say that and I use those phrases and those words to bring out the importance of this project being executed by the Rotary Inclusive Play Trust to persons living with disabilities. We also must understand, and I know the work is being done by the member for St. James North, and I will speak briefly to that, and also the member for St. Michael South, and work that was done by the member for the city, and also the member for St. Thomas who started the work. Multiple barriers stand in the way of children and youth with disabilities, and we are seeking as a government to work through those barriers. There was a call, Mr. Speaker, by the special needs parents organization some years ago, more than 2 decades ago, for a purpose-built recreational facility for persons with disability. And as a result of that call, it's not good to call names in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, but permit me this one time to mention the president of the Rotary Club of Barbados South, who conceptualized this project, Ms. Katrina Sam, in 2011. She conceptualized the Inclusive Play Project. Was an ambitious project to create an inclusive play facility where I said earlier, where children with all abilities play, they learn, they explore, they imagine together in an environment where the common experiences make a more lasting impression than their different abilities. And that was the whole essence of this project. And it was aimed at helping the wider community integrate children with disabilities into Barbadian society. And I said earlier, we know some of the challenges that parents face with their children who have disabilities, insecurity, self-esteem. These are some of the challenges that parents face with children who have disabilities. And it is important for them to have the social interaction skills, whereby a parent can leave their children at an inclusive play facility and leave their children with disabilities at an inclusive play facility and go and execute their chores. We need more inclusive play facilities across Barbados. And I will list some of the elements of this project. When finished, we see the establishment of a fully accessible recreational facility, and it is touted to be the first of its kind in this country, and some said in this hemisphere. Inclusive play will provide not only an outdoor sporting facility, but also purpose-built sensory and indoor recreational rooms. It will provide a place where parents of children with disabilities can leave their child, and I mentioned that earlier, affording them the opportunity to go to work, go and do their chores. The facility will also be designed with an indoor recreational facility that will facilitate indoor sports, facilitate cultural activities and educational activities for the disabled community. Additionally, it will feature special rooms, special use rooms such as a sensory room with light and sound stimulation and a soft padded room. And when we go through the project, as I just did, we will see that this is really an inclusive project. A food preparation area, meeting rooms, for a sales station will be provided along with other multipurpose rooms. And last but by no means least, the playground will be fully wheelchair accessible, incorporating equipment that is accessible to both disabled and able-bodied persons. This is a wonderful project. The intention is to allow children with disabilities to be able to reach every piece of equipment on the ground. Now, we as a government, we started work. I mean, we had a green paper on disability and a white paper on disability. This government in 2000 and 2001. So this administration, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, I'm not speaking, I'm not talking about DLP or BLP or politics, but I'm just reinforcing the work that this administration did and continues to do and execute on behalf of persons with disability. Other administrations did work, but we made sure that a green paper and a white paper was prepared on persons with disability. That the member now for St. James North, he is referencing. And of course, the member for St. Thomas, she is nodded because she used that green paper and white paper to effect some of the positive changes to incorporate persons with disability in this wonderful place we call our home. But Mr. Speaker, I move now to the International Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. This was signed in Barbados back in 2007 and ratified in February 2013. Again, work done by this administration. The purpose of the convention is to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disabilities, and to promote and respect and have respect for their inherent dignity. That's the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. And there are two articles that I reference in my notes, Article 7 and Article 30. Article 7 speaks to the need of all necessary measures to be taken to ensure the full enjoyment by children with disabilities of all and fundamental freedom on an equal basis with other children. They're no different to the other children based on the Article 7 in the Convention articulated on the rights of persons with disability. And Article 30, furthermore, speaks on the parties of the Convention to take appropriate measures to encourage and promote the participation to the fullest extent possible of persons with disability in mainstream sporting activities at all levels, as well as to ensure that the children with disabilities have equal access with other children to participate in play, recreation, leisure, and sporting activities, including those activities in the school system. So Article 30 is relevant to what we are doing here today, the Rotary Inclusive Play Project. But I want to mention a few barriers to inclusion by disability, and these were barriers highlighted by stakeholders when I reached out to them, and they asked me to mention some of these barriers on the floor of Parliament during my presentation. But I want to say, even though I will reference these barriers, I am not at all saying that this government has not, and this government continues to address some of these barriers that I will highlight. The member for St. Thomas, as I mentioned these barriers, I recall the member for St. Thomas speaking about auditory messaging and dealing with persons hearing impaired. I recall her coming to cabinet and asking us and saying to us that we need to do more for them. And I recall the member for St. James North. He's a fan of one of my constituents who has a disability, who's visually impaired. She was called to the bar within the last 2 years. Yes, the legal bar. Sorry, member. And he spoke passionately about the use of technical language, long sentences, and words with many syllables. And he cited those as significant barriers to understanding for people with cognitive impairment. You recall that member for St. James North? And I'm saying these are some of the barriers when I spoke to key stakeholders, mentioned written messages that prevent people with vision impairments from receiving messages, such as the use of small print or no large print versions of materials, as well as not making the material available in Braille. These were some of the challenges with persons with disability. And I recall, Mr. Speaker, that said attorney at law, and they wouldn't get into the facts of the matter. But she said to me that she could not complete a task simply because the material available was not in Braille. So we were denying someone with great intellect at the point in time, and I should not mention where because I think persons are very sensitive to these matters, and I'm on the floor of Parliament. And I have to respect these hallowed chambers. But those were some of the challenges cited when I spoke to stakeholders. Auditory messaging, critical. The use of technical language, long sentences and words with many syllables were barriers cited. And I go to one that is, while we are fighting to remove some of these barriers, the steps and curves that block a person with mobility impairment from entering a building or using a sidewalk. I heard members in this chamber echo those words in cabinet, in parliamentary settings, in focus group settings, where we have to remove some of these barriers. And I know that the work being done by the member for St. Michael South and the member for St. James North, supported by the member for St. Thomas, we are seeking to remove some of these barriers. And I know last week at the Laurel Erskine Sandyford Center, the member for St. Michael South dealt with some of these issues. I heard him. He didn't see me, but I heard him. He had stakeholders in there from across the length and breadth. The member for St. James North was there, and the member for St. Thomas, she was there also. And I heard some of these sentiments being echoed. And I go to one that I know we are working on assiduously. Denying reasonable accommodations to qualified individuals with disabilities. I hope I'm not stealing the members' thunder, the experts who will speak after me, but these are some of the key barriers that were mentioned to me when I did my research. So denying the reasonable accommodation to qualified individuals with disabilities so they can perform essential functions in their jobs for which they have applied for or have been hired to perform. Denying job opportunities to persons living with disability is discrimination. And that's not what this government is about. So we are focusing on removing some of these barriers, if not all of them. Some handicapped persons in this country may be denied access to jobs, and persons may speak to the fact that these jobs can only be done by competent personnel. But we say to you as a government, persons with disabilities are also competent personnel. And we cannot discriminate at all. We cannot put them in a box and say to them, these are the only functions you can execute. We cannot create a society where we have limited opportunities for persons with disability. We cannot do it. But I go further because the Canadian government funded the Improved Access to Justice in the Caribbean, what we call Impact Justice. The Impact Justice Project recently published a report on the access to justice for persons with disabilities in CARICOM countries. I see the member for St. James North. I am not going to speak too much on the because I know you have a lot to say, but it would be remiss of me to lead this debate and don't mention some of the work. The Impact Justice work started in that Ministry of Commerce. And I know very well when that project came to fruition. And the report published by Impact Justice provides an overview of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disability, 2006, and its accompanying protocols, as implemented by 11 CARICOM countries, of which we are one. And the report draws on the experiences of persons with disability in terms of how they access justice in comparisons with able-bodied persons. So a lot of work is being done in this country. And you know, one of the things that they looked at was how persons with disability can access the courtrooms. And I want to compliment this government because on Friday night, the Deputy Prime Minister and the members, some other members, the member for Christchurch East, we were fortunate to witness the opening of Henry Ford and David Simmons Judicial Complex it is. And when we toured that complex, I say without a shadow of a doubt that the work done by the Attorney General and the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, the Attorney General's office who had overall oversight for the project. The member for Christchurch West started that project. The rejuvenation project was to refurbish the old Supreme Court building. But this report from Impact Justice, which look at persons with disabilities, we were able to tour that facility. And I say to you, as a government, to the Prime Minister, to those members who were part of that project, I thank you on behalf of the people with disabilities. Because persons with disabilities can now enter the courtrooms to give testimony. They're not, I'm not speaking about being criminals. They can work. They can work. because it is a disabled-friendly, refurbished building. And I congratulate this. It is times like this, member for St. James North. This is probably one of the few times you heard me speaking on disability. But I have another example to share with you, members in this chamber. My family in the constituency of Christchurch, Essential, the here was from Mount Roads. If you go to the house today, you'll see a 56-year-old man living there with a disability. My first cousin, my uncle's son. So I've had two cousins who I've interacted with for most of my life living with disability. And one of the disappointments that I have, that young man did not enjoy a life like my cousin Ivadni, who migrated to Canada. He did not enjoy that life because he was housed up. He had limited social skills to the point that when he was brought out into the environment, and I can speak to myself, so I'm not ashamed to say these things. He was literally a shut-in, and when you brought him out, he would react in a violent way because he was not accustomed to the environment and interacting with persons who were not within his domain at home. And instead of the family, I'm not criticizing his late father and his late grandmother whom he lived with. I don't think that they knew how to deal with it. I, at the time, was young with him. He was older than I was at the time. Still is older because he's still alive. But had I had the knowledge of how to treat the persons with disability, my cousin, who's now 56 years, would have had a different life. And you probably would have seen him in this chamber as I speak to you this morning on the Rotary Inclusive Play Project. So I say to you, I use that as an example to say, we have to have more educational opportunities within our communities to teach families how to treat the persons with disability. My poor grandmother and his poor father had not a clue. And I was seeing when I visited from Christchurch, from St. George to Christchurch, to spend time with my late grandmother, Pearl Harewood, who was a janitor at the Christchurch Boys' School, whom a member in the last administration, and I often say this, you hear me say this, when I sat where the member for St. Lucy is sitting, and the member for St. George North, and the member for St. Michael West, the member for St. Michael Southeast, and I sat there. And we recall the former education minister. I got up on a point of order on a matter, and he said to me, don't mind you, your mother used to clean up after me. Your grandmother used to clean up after me. He can put me in court because he said that in this chamber.
Can I put you in court for anything you said here?
I said that. He said that in this chamber, seeking to insult me, but I was proud of my upbringing because that janitor at Christchurch Boys' School, today, when I travel to Christchurch, and the member for Christchurch Essential, you are lucky because I had my eyes on Christchurch Essential. You are lucky. The member for Christchurch, Essential. I had my eyes on Essential. Because at the end of the day, when I traverse the road of Mount Roads, coming from King Supermarket, and I go into Christchurch Essential, and I go to Lodge Road, I get breadfruit, I get yams, and I get several things because person said to me, your grandmother looked after me at school. She was a janitor. I repeat this because
Shame on John.
we have to be careful
Shameful.
what we say and what we do and how we seek to insult persons. That's not her. I said this morning,
I see a picture.
I said this morning,
Shame.
I can get it. I said this morning, just before I came here, we held a moment's silence and I said a few words on the passing of the financial controller, Ms. Brooms, within the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance. And I said in my opening sentence, I said there's more to life than work. We have to learn how to respect people. We have to learn how to treat people, because at the end of the day, we don't know tomorrow, the Lord forbid, something may happen with one of us and we end up with a disability. So when I speak on this topic, you know me, I am very emotional. You can't see it, but I am. I internalize things. And I say to you, the people of this country, this government will do everything in its powers to ensure that persons with disabilities have equal opportunities. We will do everything in our powers to make sure that persons with disabilities are employed just like any one of us. And I dare to say that I have a bias towards persons with disabilities. And I make no apologies in saying that because I have lived it. It is a positive bias, of course. I favor them. I treat them with dignity. I treat them with pride. Not only because the Sutherland and the Harewood family had two persons, respectively, with disability, but because I recognize from an early age, my cousin did homework with me. She had polio. The late Evadne Sutherland, who migrated, that I spoke about, she did homework with me. Brighter than, of course. So, as I speak to the report on Impact Justice, the report from Impact Justice on persons with disabilities, they highlighted quite a few things. The provision of access to buildings in which persons with disabilities do business, and they mentioned the courthouses. The need for amenities such as disabled-friendly bathrooms, and I list a few here. Improve arrangements for transportation. I want to congratulate this government again as I mentioned transportation. The electric buses that we brought into this country, I thank the member, Christchurch West, and also member St. Michael West Central, it is? Yes, member for St. Michael West Central. I want to thank you and the member for Christchurch West and the Prime Minister for recognizing we didn't only buy electric buses because of our thrust to become renewable energy compliant by a certain time, but we recognize that when we bought those buses, that we had to cater for persons with disabilities riding on our buses. And I want to thank this government again. And affordable chairs where we can put them in. There's a space for them, wheelchairs. So when we stand here and members get up to speak this morning, we speak from a position of strength with respect to how we have treated as a government successive administrations, not only under Owen Seymour Arthur, but under Mayor Amor Mortley, led by Mayor Amor Mortley, how we treat with persons with disabilities. And I'm proud to be part of this government. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to just list two other aspects of the impact justice report, where they cited some of the responses of persons with disabilities. These are persons speaking. They also mentioned the need to accommodate for the hearing and sight impaired. That's how they wrote it. More accommodation for the hearing and sight impaired. So these were some of the comments, the responses coming from persons with disability. And ultimately, the responses given to impact justice show a need for further intervention that would provide an opportunity for persons with disability to enjoy full and effective participation in a society on an equal basis with others. Now, Mr. Speaker, this brings me briefly now to the role we are playing as a government to improve the lives of persons with disability. This government in the year 2022, and in the month of June, on the first day of June, established an advisory committee on persons with disability. And the responsibility of that committee was to guide the establishment of a commission for improving the lives of persons with disability. It was also tasked with preparing a national policy on disabilities and ultimately legislation, comprehensive legislation targeting at addressing the issues faced by persons with disabilities. And I want to say this morning, and I reference the member for St. James North, who is the chairman of this committee, but I also want to take a step back and thank the member for St. Thomas, who started the work. And I also want to recognize the goodly minister, the minister responsible for people's empowerment and elder affairs, whose responsibility it ultimately is to address these issues faced with persons with disability, the member for St. Michael's South. And these three members in this Lord Chamber this morning, when we have long left this chamber, we can talk about all the work we have done with the economy. We can talk about all the houses that we are building. We can talk about all the fancy buildings and hotels we will build. But I think the long-lasting work that will be recognized by the people of this country and worldwide, especially by the Rotary Club, would be the work that we are doing to improve the lives of persons with disability, to remove the stigma and discrimination from this society. And I want to compliment you, three members in this chamber this morning, member for St. Thomas, the member for St. Michael's South, and the member for St. James North. And you heard me this morning, given my own experiences and my life associated with persons with disability, day in, day out. And I remember coming to this chamber, and I want to say this to you. We were like five bosom buddies back in 2013. The member for St. James North, he was one. The member for St. Michael's Southeast. The former member for the city. The member for St. George South, that is myself. And the former member for Christchurch West. The five of us were new to this chamber. But there was a man in this chamber who, in my view, stood tall. And the members, the government members of the day back then in 2013, whenever he rose to speak, they would say they can't understand him. But he stood tall in this chamber for 5 years. And I salute the member for St. James North this morning, because he was like the piranha. He was like the attacker, and he was the one who defended the four of us, the other four of us, because he would get up in this chamber most days and say, touch one, touch all. And he was never afraid to debate with those members who tried to make mock sport at the member telling him that they don't understand. And that member has immense intellect, and I speak to him about him this morning as I stand in front of him, and I know he will speak at some point in time in this chamber. I knew I would get the opportunity to say a thank you at some point in time for supporting our cause back in 2013 and bringing us to the government of the day in 2018, because it's debate like those that persons would meet me. His mother would always say, him and I had a special relationship over there, and all five of us. But he was the fierce debater out of all of us. And he did what he had to do on behalf of us. So I thank you, the member for St. James North. Disability is not an impediment to success. It is not. You have been successful in your legal career, and you have been successful in your political career. And I say without a shadow of a doubt, you are one of the best parliamentarians. You represent your constituency in an excellent way. And I got the opportunity on the floor of Parliament. It will be recorded in the Hansard that I said those words, and I'm proud of you, member. But I move to my final aspect of my discourse this morning, the whole aspect of the benefits of sports. So I mentioned earlier the whole stigma and discrimination experienced by persons with disability that is often evoked by negative perceptions of others in society. This can be erased through sports. And why? Because you have the opportunity not to showcase your disability, but you have the opportunity to showcase the other aspects of your existence as a human being on the field of play. So that is when the true strength in sport comes out with persons with disability, whether it's at the Par or the Olympic Games, it's at the disabled games. But persons truly show who they are other than being disabled through sports, through intellectual achievements. And I keep referencing that young lady who's now an attorney at law. We've once had a president who I should mention also in the Senate who did a wonderful job. And now we have another attorney in the Senate who's also someone with a disability. So engaging in sporting activities is considered one of the means through which the negative perception and the attitude of society towards persons with disability can change. And it transcends culture, language, social barriers, while engendering inclusion and what I call adaptation of persons with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, disabled sports in this country. We have disabled sports currently played in this country: blind cricket, athletics, swimming, football, goalball, road tennis, cycling, golf, and softball, badminton as well. And, Mr. Speaker, we also have, there are 5 disabled schools. There may be more, but I have 5 in my research. The Dirk Smith School, the Learning Center, the Ann Hill School, the Irving Wilson School, and the Challoner Schools. But persons who have graced the walls of those 5 schools have participated in national and regional sporting events. As I stand here today, and I am proud, I'm very proud to say to you, there's a coach at the National Sports Council that was hired during my tenure who went to one of these schools. He also represented Barbados, the West Indies B team. He played national cricket, and he's now a coach. He represented Barbados at the Carifta Games as well as a junior and senior national cricketer. And I feel proud that I can stand here in these chambers and say to you that he is now a member of the coaching staff at the National Sports Council. And he won't mind if I call his name Ryan Chicken Breast Nurse. Excuse me, Mr. Speaker. And he is happy to know that he has been chosen as a coach. He has level 3 coaching certification. But I want to go further, because this morning some news came to me that a young man who currently attends the Derek Smith School is in Colombia at the CAC Beach Games, competing in wrestling. I got this last night, but when I woke up this morning, I heard that that young man, Ruben Wilcher, got a bronze medal for Barbados in Colombia in wrestling. And I woke up to that news this morning. And this is testimony to how you give persons the opportunity with disabilities to really showcase their talent. And perhaps Ruben can go on to become an ambassador for this country. I might be speaking things into being. I don't mind. But I would love to see him go on to become an ambassador for this country. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to be much longer, but it would be remiss of me if I spoke this morning and didn't make reference to the Olympic Games and also the Special Olympic Games, and to make a distinction between the two. The Olympic Games are multi-sport disability events for athletes with physical, mental, and sensory disabilities, while the Special Olympics deals with persons with intellectual disabilities. That's the distinction. And the majority of athletes who go to the Paralympics Games, these are considered professional athletes. Many of them go on to become icons. And that's why we cannot underscore the importance of this facility this resolution that we have brought to the House this morning. They become full-time sport professionals. And some of them become coaches, some of them become commentators, some of them become experts in the field of Paralympics, and even dealing with able-bodied sportsmen and women. And it is said for over 100 years, persons with disability competed in the Paralympic Games worldwide. From as early as 1888 in Germany. It started there in Berlin, where the deaf athletes, persons, hearing impaired athletes, I did some research, member for St. James North, were able to start this journey. And it was only after the Second World War that they were recognized and categorized officially all through the world. But Barbados competed in the Paralympic Games firstly in the year 2000. And we have participated in every summer Paralympic Games since then. But only 2 persons have represented Barbados at these games, and I will list the 2. You know, the Lord often put you in certain places to say certain things. Daniel Coltrus, and I heard the member for St. Thomas touting cycling, Paralympic cycling. Daniel Coltrus, who represented Barbados in 2000 and 2004 at the Paralympic Games in cycling. And one of my very close friends, hailing from that district of South District, a man by the name of David Taylor, in 2008, he swam for Barbados at the Paralympics. There are only 2 persons. He had his left leg amputated above the knee in 2001 as a result of cancer. That did not stop Mr. David Taylor. And every time I journey to that lovely district of South District, I go to see David Taylor. He does picture frames. He's an entrepreneur. He does recaning of chairs, repairs to chairs, any type of chair. He's talented with his hands. He did not allow that disability to overcome him. He was able to represent Barbados in 2008 as a swimmer in Paralympics. But Mr. Speaker, I want to end again where he started. I want to commend the Rotary Club of Barbados for the work being done in improving the quality of life and promoting the social inclusion of children with disabilities in this country. And this project that will be implemented by the Rotary Inclusive Play Trust, this will go a long way in building the self-esteem and the confidence of not only persons with disabilities, but our young people who are able-bodied, where they understand the importance of socializing and the social benefits. Building them too as young individuals is tremendous benefit to have both disabled and able-bodied coexisting in one place as young people. And I am calling on all organizations, whether not-for-profit or profit, the private sector. We need, if we are truly to build a society, an inclusive society, where we have the Evadne Sutherlands driving around in this country, where we have persons who are visually impaired working in this country, where we have persons who have an hearing impaired deficit or challenges working in this country, or whatever disability we confront, we give them the opportunity to become equals in this country. I end by calling not only on us as a government to carry on the good work that we are doing, and I will compliment again my 3 colleagues, the member for St. Thomas, the member for St. James North, and the member for St. Michael South, who's leading this charge, the member for St. Michael South. But I'm calling on the private sector as I close. A lot more work, philanthropic and humanitarian work needs to be done in this country to assist persons with disability, the vulnerable community, persons who their lives are challenging as a result of some health impediment, some health challenge, whether they're disabled or otherwise. But I'm calling on the private sector to join with us as a government in building an inclusive society where fair play, where opportunity, where justice and equitable opportunities become the order of the day for every single person, whether with a disabled impediment or not. We as a people must coexist, and we as a people, once these opportunities have been created, Barbados will truly become the best place to live, work, do business, and raise a family. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity, and I do beg that the resolution to rescind be agreed in this lower chamber.
Honourable Member St. Michael South.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, sir. Good morning to all of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a conversation, obviously, that attracts my attention because of the portfolio that I now hold, but because of my own life's experience. I want to begin by thanking the Honourable Member for St. George South for so eloquently and so passionately and so in depth dealing with the issues that are confronting persons with disabilities in this country and the government's approach to trying to rectify these issues. I want to thank him, sir, for acknowledging all who has played a part in making sure that this kind of thinking, this kind of progress could come to fruition. I also want to thank, as he did, sir, the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, who held this ministry responsible for persons with disabilities before I did, for the work that she did in leading the charge. And very soon, sir, this Honourable Chamber will be in receipt of legislation that will improve the lives of persons with disabilities, sir. I want to thank the Honourable Member for St. James North as well, who is chairman of that committee, sir, that was established to advise us on how to create the commission that would improve the lives of persons with disabilities. So a lot of work, sir, is going on in this particular area, sir, and I am thankful that I have the opportunity to lead in this particular moment, sir. Naturally, I would want to thank the Rotary Club South, who would be doing a lot of this work, sir. It is through the hands of other people that we will be able to get to the destination that we are seeking to get to, sir. I want to thank also, as I begin, the Barbados Council for the Disabled, who has done yeoman's service, sir, in this country. It is one of the NGOs, community-based organizations, charitable organizations, sir, that is doing tremendous work, sir. And this country owes the Council for the Disabled a debt of gratitude. I must, as I begin, also thank the Sir David Simmons, sorry, sir, for permitting me to call his name, Sir David Simmons, who is chairing the Law Reform Commission, and who, through his efforts, sir, we are able to have the draft legislation for persons with disabilities finished and being brought to this House very soon. And I'm sure the Honourable Member for St. James North will speak to a lot of these details. Today, I do not intend to do that. So I want to set this debate in the context of social development, sir. I want to do so because all of us understand, sir, almost naturally, innately, that those of us who are born into this country expect a certain standard of living. We know, sir, that for most of us, being born into Barbados comes with a great promise. And for those of us who are trained in social development, sir, we understand this to mean, sir, that there is that rich marriage, that integration of social progress, but there must also be some economic growth. There must also be some economic progress. There must also be the idea that development reaches everybody in the fullest context, sir. And for me, I've always understood, sir, and the approach that I've taken at the ministry, sir, I've always understood social development in three ways. And that when you are trying to attend to the needs of a group, particularly a disadvantaged group, you must look at how needs are met, how problems are managed, and what opportunities for advancement exist or that you are able to create. Needs are met, problems are managed, and opportunities for advancement. It is in that context, sir, that I have brought all kinds of understanding, not only to persons with disabilities, sir, but to the elderly, to children's issues, to persons with HIV, to the most vulnerable, sir, in this country, because we have to look at how their needs are met, how we manage some of these social problems, and how we create opportunities for advancement, sir. And we could do that at the macro level, as we do in the ministry, but we also must get down in the weeds and do it, sir, in the lives of people. It's okay to have a bird's eye view, but sometimes you need a worm's understanding. Down on the ground, what are the realities facing people, sir? And that is what I think, sir, should be, for me, at least today, because there will be another time, I think, when we bring the legislation, That is the conversation that I wish to have today, sir. How do we look at the challenges facing persons with disabilities and other vulnerable groups within the context of how well are we ensuring their social development in this country, sir? And I said, sir, there is known to all of us, whether it is told to us or whether we've come into contact with it through our own life experience, sir, but we believe that there is a promise of Barbados. We believe that being born in this country, sir, entitles us to certain things. We believe that being born in this country allows us opportunity, sir, to rise sometimes from poorest of circumstances to hold the highest offices in this land, sir. To be born, sir, in circumstances where people do not see you, sir, and command the world stage. To be the Prime Minister of a small island developing state as we are, sir. But to hold the international community, sir, their attention, because that is the promise of Barbados. That all of us, sir, born into this country believe that we can go on to do the greatest thing, sir, because we were fed that from the time we were children, sir. We saw it through our political leaders. We see it in our community practitioners. That Barbados is real. But for some in this country, sir, they have not seen the benefit of that promise. And that is the kind of distorted development, sir, that we came to office to be able to address. If it is that the promise of Barbados has not reached persons with disabilities, sir, then we are doing ourselves a tremendous disservice, sir. Those of you who know me well know that I like the words of John Donne over and over in most things, sir. But he says that no man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. All of us, sir, are interconnected. During the election campaign, I would say that we are all threads in the same fabric of life, interwoven into forming the finest tapestry. That is what makes us special. That we are able to utilize people's skills, sir, to recognize and to utilize people's skills, sir, regardless of their own circumstances. Again, I would say, sir, without fear of contradiction, that in this country, that has not been the reality for persons with disabilities. And that if you, sir, or any of us, sir, have a conversation, as we've done over the last few months, sir, under the chairmanship of the member for St. James North, if you have conversations with persons with disabilities, they would tell you that they feel they've been left out of the development of this country. And sir, for me, that is unconscionable. I know it is unconscionable for the Honourable Prime Minister and for the Cabinet and for the Parliament, sir. And that is why, sir, we are seeking to do things to make life different. We will not be able to do it on our own. Again, I want to thank Rotary Club South and all the different service organizations in this country, sir, who are doing things to make life easier for other people, sir. But if you look at international indicators, and I don't have time to get into all of it today, sir, but if you were to look at the indicators, just look at the indicators. For most of us, if you look at the Human Development Index, you go down the road. You look at the areas, sir, pertaining to health. You look at the issues pertaining to education. I mean, you pick any of them. And then, sir, you apply the standard that I just said. Needs are met, problems managed, opportunities for advancement in any of these areas. And for persons, sir, who are considered able-bodied, sir, and then look at the situation facing persons with disabilities. And you would see, sir, that what we have, in a true sense, in this regard, is a distorted development. And distorted development, sir, is where that development is not even for everyone. Where you could look and see that some people are prospering, and then you can look and see that others are not prospering, sir. And that your policies continue to perpetuate that kind of negativity. Or where your policies, sir, continue to reinforce these existing patterns of inequality, rather deliberate or otherwise. That is distorted development. And I would say, sir, that in relation to persons with disabilities, Barbados and the Caribbean has seen tremendous distorted development, sir. And that is where we have to be able to fix it. And sir, we say persons with disabilities, and you know, it sounds like there's a homogenous group of people and everybody's disability is the same, but you know very well that that's not the case. And that when I say persons with disabilities, that we are talking about a wide range of disabilities, sir. I won't get into that. I don't know if the Honourable Member for St. James North will, but we're talking about a wide range of disabilities. And that if we are going to address disabilities, then we have to address a wide range of disabilities. Many of us like to say we've addressed disabilities, sir, because we've addressed persons who are in wheelchairs. And we haven't addressed, sir, people who may have cognitive issues, other mental issues, sensory issues, sir. There is a young man, I think I spoke of him, sir, one night. He asked me if I drive with my lights on, my bright lights on. It was a day we were at the swimming pool, sir, for children with autism. He asked me if I drive with my bright lights on. And I said, no, not really. He said he doesn't like the bright lights. The conversation actually began by him telling me that he was tired. He was so tired he hadn't slept. And I asked him why he didn't sleep. And then we had the conversation about the lights. He said, do you drive with your lights on? Your bright lights? I said, no. He said, I don't like the bright lights. I said, well, I don't understand. He said, the bright lights, sir, when I am home in my bed last night, all I could see were the lights. And I got no sleep because people refused to turn off the lights. And he said his dad was flashing the other people to dim their lights, but it wouldn't dim their lights. He couldn't sleep because the lights affect him differently from how the lights affect you or how the lights affect me. And that unless we start to understand what the challenges are, we will not begin to address them. And so I ask people who drive unnecessarily with bright lights, when you're not approaching an oncoming vehicle, or if it is that you have those extremely white lights, that shouldn't be on the road anyhow, because you have to look away when they come to you, that you are causing people unnecessarily all kinds of discomfort. But we have to begin to understand, sir, that there are all kinds of disabilities, sir, if we are going to be able to address them, sir. And I believe that a lot of these are systemic issues. I believe that, sir, because it is too consistent in almost every aspect of our existence. I just said, sir, if you go through health, education, transportation, social service delivery, every component, housing, every component of our existence, sir, you see that persons with disabilities, sir, are not getting a fair share. We have to be able to address it, sir. I think that this situation is going to require our focus, of course, but at the same time, it is going to require our finance. It is okay for us to come and to talk, sir, but it costs to care. And that essentially, if you look at the trajectory that Barbados is facing, sir, we now need to know, and I've told the disabilities unit this, I want to know every single person in this country that has a disability. I want to know where they live, what is the nature of this disability, and the work that we're doing with the university, sir, to identify, using geospatial mapping, where these persons are, so that in the event of a disaster, we could move these people first. Is it along a bus route? Is it a good road? These are the things that are brought into that conversation, so that we can address these issues, sir, that are vexing issues, but many of them, sir, have become pervasive, not because they can't be solved, but simply because they have been ignored. Enough is enough. And it is about time, sir, that we begin to address a lot of these issues, sir. So one of the things we have to continue to do is to bring awareness to these issues, to draw attention to these issues, to have the public understand, sir, that these things are not right. I was so pleased just over the weekend, sir, I saw somebody parking in the disabled spot, a spot for a person with disability, and as they reversed, it was there by the cinema. They didn't see it on the road, but they also have these signs in the for you can see when you look back. The person got out, saw the car park was full, saw the disability sign, got back in his car, started saying to himself, I can't do this, got back in his car and he moved, sir. That is the attitude that we need in Barbados. That is what we need from Barbadians. Sir, I have not come to this chamber to call people to do unbelievable things, sir. It is in the small things that we will make a difference in the lives of people, sir. I have said in this chamber, the people who have carried most of us will never have the name on a plaque on any wall in this country. The people you knew in your community that continue to do work may never be honored with a name on a building. But the way that we have made an influence in other people's lives, sir, are in the simple, subtle things, sir. And as minister responsible now for persons with disabilities, sir, that is my charge and it is my mandate. But let us look at needs, sir, and I will go through a few very quickly. In education, In the conversation that we had, sir, it became very clear to me that there are things for us to be able to do now in education. Education, sir, is not only the place where people will go and get an education, but it is also a filter because it is oftentimes in the educational institution that you can determine if somebody has a disability or not. Many parents may not be able to identify it. We have to strengthen our teachers' capacity to be able to do this identification. We have to strengthen the assessments to be able to ensure that, because if you catch it earlier, some of them you can work with the people earlier, work with the children earlier. We owe them that, sir. And there was a time in Barbados, I recall as a child, sir, when you would go to school and they would give you an assessment for all kinds of things. People would come in and they would test your eyes in school. You remember, I'm sure you remember, sir? They would come in and then they would look at your teeth and tell you if you need to go to the dentist or not, and then make sure you go and get your teeth clean. In this country, sir, it is almost impossible for children with disabilities to go to the dentist. Ask, remember, for St. James North. One, because it is expensive, very expensive, and if it's a severe disability, you will often have to sedate the child. Many parents cannot afford it, sir. Many of them, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West is looking at me, because he also knows that I've sent persons to him, and in his kindness, he's dealt with me for free. But it is expensive if they had to pay. It is expensive. And sir, we need to be able to make these assessments at school. By the time they're discovered, sometimes later in life, it is too deep, too far gone. And the things that we could do, sir, to make life easier. As children, you can't do it when the people are older, sir. I also feel that we need to start teaching, as we've said about foreign languages, sir, we need to start teaching sign language in schools, in primary school, because that would allow people to communicate. But beyond that, it would give people a sensitivity to this issue, sir, because children don't necessarily mean to be unkind. Children just do not understand oftentimes how to treat people that are different. And if we teach them how to communicate via sign language, sir, like the child who told us when we were at foundation school, no, sir, we were at the church, close to foundation school. And the parent got up and spoke of his child, sir, who went to play with some other children. They realized that he had a disability, sir, and then they stoned the boy. Because our children, sir, we have to talk to our children about these things. Because we start to raise, sir, a whole generation of people, sir, who are not able to respond to these things, sir. I want the young people in this country to show kindness to other people, people who are disabled, and people who are different, sir. I feel, sir, that a lot can be done in this regard, sir. If we continue to look at what is happening, sir, in our educational system, sir, and the reason that I'm focusing on education in the beginning, sir, is because I feel education can make a big difference. And in this country, most people who have a disability, sir, are cheated of a good education. And I say so, sir, because I know it. And they're cheated of a good education. In many countries across the world, sir, people have, based on their level of disability, they may be allowed a person in the classroom beside them to help them to cope. Based on their level of disability, sir, we do it now. We give people a little bit of extra time, sir, but that is on the assumption that we recognize the disability. I have a friend, sir, in the international agencies, a senior member there, who told me that when she went around to look at the schools, she could not put her daughter in any of these schools because they just did not have the facilities. That is not the reputation we want for ourselves, sir. We don't want the people in the international community to say that. But more importantly to me, we do not want that for Barbadian children. We have to do a lot better, sir, when it comes to attending to the needs of persons with disabilities, sir. But education, sir, if you cheat a person of education in this country, we both, sir, rightfully so, as a country, about our educational level. We talk about restoring university for free to adults, well, relatively so. But we need to put ourselves in a position, sir, to talk happily, boldly, with pride about what we do for children with disabilities, sir, in the school system. If you fail to help a child in school, sir, you have failed that child at every aspect, every angle, every component, sir, of their life, sir. It has to change. We have to do better, sir, in our educational institutions, sir. If you look at need, even on the roads, people need to be able to get across the streets, sir. A lot of our streets still remain very disabled, very unfriendly to persons with disabilities, very unfriendly to people who don't have disabilities, to be truthful. Sometimes you walk in, you say, what, sir? And then you see that one of those things just missing. Sometimes they might put a can in it so you don't drop in it, but oftentimes they don't.
No reals.
Or that the road walk sometimes and then it just drops in, sir. Remember you're planning in this new Barbados? We have to plan with persons with disabilities in mind. When we are planning in this new Barbados, persons with disabilities have to be at the table. Or we continue to do them and this country a disservice, sir. I have said to my staff, if they were here, they would tell you, that while I think this ministry attends to some of the most urgent needs of this country, in my mind, dealing with the issue for persons with disabilities must be our most important charge. Because the deficit in terms of people's development is most clearly seen in relation to persons who have disabilities, sir. If we look at some of the problems that we are dealing with, sir, how problems are managed. I spoke briefly of the attitude, sir, I won't go over it. But abuse. And people with disabilities, sir, are continuously abused in this country. And when we bring the child legislation, sir, which we will bring to this parliament by the end of this year, and we go through the definition of child abuse, a lot of the definitions apply. And we talk about verbal abuse and neglect and emotional abuse. But physical abuse, sexual abuse, sir, you know, I know, all of us in here know, people in Barbados know. Sometimes you will see a person, sir, that you know, because of her level of development, is still at the level of a child. And you see them pregnant, time and time again. Sometimes they can't even tell you who the father is. That is because some person is taking advantage of the situation. And we have to bring an end to those things, sir. I also feel, of course, that persons with disabilities, sir, are allowed to have their sexual freedom like anybody else. Should be allowed, if they're cognitive enough, sir, to make the decisions, should be allowed to pursue relationships like anybody else, if they are able to make that determination. But when they are not, and people are taking advantage of them, sir, we have to make those persons feel the weight of the law. Oh, yes. Sir, because people are taking advantage of people who have disabilities, sir, in this country, sir. Healthcare, again, I mean, sir, we could go through a whole lot of them. I don't want to spend the few minutes that I have, sir, going through all of these. And lastly, sir, needs are met, problems are managed, opportunities for advancement. When I spoke of the educational system, sir, I spoke of it in the context of what occurs in our schools, but also what occurs in our training institutions. I want to thank the NTI, sir, for the work that they're doing to ensure that persons with disabilities are included. But if you consider that education for all of us has been that pillar, that post, that step that has allowed us to move from one position in life to another. You, I know very well, would not be in that chair were it not for education, sir. I would not be standing here were it not be for education, sir. Why should you have? Why should I have? Why should we all have the benefit of a good education that allows us to change our social circumstances when people with disabilities do not have that same opportunity, sir? And then we consider this society to be a meritocratic society. We say that this society is based on merit. If you have the qualifications, you will get the job. If you have the requisite training, you will get the job. If you have the experience, you will get the job. Persons with disabilities won't have the qualifications, but they can hardly get into school. When they do get into school, they can hardly get the opportunity, sir, to do well because they don't have the support. So there are people in this country, like the former president of the Senate, sir, who I will continue to commend, sir, because to make it as a person with disabilities in this country, sir, you've got to be something special. But it should not be so. That should not be the exception to the rule. It should be the case that persons with disabilities are able to do well in this country like anybody else. And the barriers that are preventing people from doing well in this country, sir, are not the barriers that are intrinsic or that live within the persons with disabilities. The barriers that are preventing people from doing well in this country are ours, in the systems that we built. Some, sir, in the 60s and the 50s, that we still continue to use. People using all kind of words to describe people. You're an imbecile. You're retarded. Offensive at the core. And we continue, sir, to let people pass, sir. We got to pull them up when we know that people are doing things that are wrong in this country, sir. And that for all that we do, when we bring the legislation, for all that we do, invariably what we must achieve is a transition in people's attitude, people's mindset, sir. And imagine if you're badgered. You know, when we as a people don't understand difference, sir, it troubles me because most of us are of color, sir, came to this country against our will, were tormented for years because we were different, and also because people wanted to use us for their own exploits and advantage. And then we turn around and do that same thing to people with disabilities because they're different. People get treated badly because they are different, sir. And something has to change in this society, sir, if we are to make the promise of Barbados real for all. I say to you that the promise of Barbados is real for none if the promise of Barbados is not real for all. That is our mandate. That is our mandate, sir. And so for all that we are doing in the ministry, sir, to make sure that at the end of the day, people with disabilities can live, it is because, sir, that is the society that our forefathers envisioned. That is what Barrow thought of. It is what Grantley Adams thought of. That is what, you know, I often feel, sir, that we praise our forefathers, sir, for what they have done, more so than for the way they were thinking, the way they thought about the world. Because if we understood how they thought about the world, we would not limit ourselves to only appreciating what they did. Because we would know that were they alive today, they would be thinking about the new world. How does Barbados make its way in the new world? What will be the role for all Barbadians, sir? That is where we have to go, sir. But as I, sir, get to my final point, sir, how do we do this? How do we do this? I've heard, sir, we often talk about the private sector, sir, and the NGO. The Barbadian private sector, sir, is not the American private sector. They don't have those level of resources. You're hardly going to find a private sector organization donating $5-10 million, but they could donate 5. They could donate 10. They could donate 20. We are calling on all the private sector organizations, sir, to do more. I am happy that I've seen in the recent past, sir, many private sector organizations reach out to the National Disabilities Unit, and I also want to thank them for the work that they've been doing, sir, especially in the recent past. I think the National Disabilities Unit is doing an exemplary job. In the recent past, sir, the amount of things that they have done for people with disabilities in this country, sir, is amazing. People are reaching out to the National Council, sir, and asking, do you have persons who fit this particular job description? So they recognize, sir, that there's a need now to do more for people. So when I was head of the constituency councils, we sent out a letter to all the NGOs in Barbados, because there are a lot of NGOs listed on paper. Sir, would you know that most of those letters came back unopened? That many postmen could not even find where these NGOs are? That these NGOs really do not exist, perhaps outside the minds of some people who might have gone to the registry and registered them, but never really practiced as an NGO? Or that some of them had a charismatic leader, and when that charismatic leader leaves or dies, the organization still exists in theory, but not in real terms. And that when we want to work through a lot of these NGOs, it is going to be difficult because a lot of these NGOs simply don't exist. And that the work of the government must be, if we're talking seriously about building social capital, part of our work must be building back the civil society sector in Barbados so that they can deliver on the promise of Barbados, so that they too can deliver to persons who have disabilities, sir. So I feel the first thing, sir, not in some esoteric way, the first thing is in a real way, look at the NGOs, sir, see where the gaps are and to build them. That is why, sir, we work with the Council for the Disabled. But, sir, they would tell you that for almost every organization that is representing persons with disabilities we have met with, some that never got the support of the government, now are getting support from the government, because we know, sir, that this is only going to come to fruition if everybody is involved, sir. Sir, we also have to make sure, sir, that a lot of the things that we do as individuals reach other people. We started a program, the Honourable Member for the City and myself, under the directorship of the PM, the Each One Reach 1,000 family, that the member told me to call the One Family, which we now call the One Family. The One Family program, sir, you'll soon hear us advertising it, where we are asking a person to just reach out and help another person. This morning on my way here, I had a call with a lady, sir, who told me she's a pensioner. Her only pension is from the government. She has no real wealth, but that she's doing 75 hampers. She goes around and she raises it. She's asking people for donations, and she's been able to, over the last few years, to do 75 hampers at Christmas in her own name, as well as in the name of the church that she works with. But she goes out and she does it. We don't need a government all the time, sir, to come here and tell us what we have to do. We know that in our community, sir, that the people who fed us, sometimes when we had nothing to eat, you knock on a door, somebody give you something to eat. We know this. We know, sir, that when you go to do a little pot on the side, sir, you know, in the plan you used to say you're doing a knots. When you're going to do a little pot, you can bring the peas, he can bring the rice, somebody might bring chicken if you're lucky, because chicken was a luxury. But then the fish man was cheap, so you might get some fish. But everybody would bring something. And, sir, that is the principle of the Each One Reach One. When you go to the supermarket, if you buy 10 tins of corned beef, or corned beef so expensive now, if you buy sardine, sir, you give somebody one or two. Because basically, because these things are expensive, we now have to be able to help one another, sir. And, sir, we have to be able to plan, sir, as I get to the end of my presentation, sir, we have to plan for aging. We have to plan for aging. And I say so in a conversation on persons with disabilities because a disproportionate share of our elderly people have disabilities. Sir, you would know whether it is a physical disability, whether it is a disability brought on by the diseases associated with old age, like dementia, and so on. A lot of them are dealing with disabilities, high blood pressure, you know, they lose a limb. We have to plan for aging because that is a disproportionate share of our persons with disabilities. And in the next 10 years, most of us, sir, are going to be near 60. The average age for Barbadians now is 40-something, you know. Barbados is an aged society. Yet we continue to look at, if you look at the expenditure, sir, we continue to allocate resources almost as if this is 20 years ago. Everything has changed. We have to change the way we allocate resources because the society has changed. It costs a lot more to cater for one older person than it does to cater for one child. Yet we're going to have a lot more older people in 10, 15 years than we do children. We have to look at these things, sir. The accident that we saw yesterday, sir, accidents on the road, gunshots, all these things, sir, are leading to increased numbers of persons with disabilities and putting a strain on our resources, sir. And finally, sir, we have to get better at transitioning. Some people are born with disabilities, sir, and they're given a hard deal in life. We have to do better there, sir. But when you are not born with a disability, you acquire a disability late in life. The transitioning is so difficult. If you acquire a disability, sir, as a grown man, never having known it, you go blind. You lose your hearing. Just imagine that tomorrow morning, all of a sudden, you can't see. The transitioning, the tools in place, sir, to make sure that people transition easily from one state to another state. We have to plan for it. These are the things, sir, that I feel we have to be able to address, sir, in this particular debate, sir. But also, I feel these are the things we have to address in society, sir. I am proud of the work that has been done by this government. You will see when the legislation comes to this house, sir, that it is thorough. I also want to again thank the Honourable Member for St. James North. His discipline, his commitment, his service to persons with disabilities is way beyond his service to himself, sir. I see it every single day. When he calls me, when he asks me, sir, what are we doing with this? Why hasn't this happened, sir? I want to thank him for the charge that he's leading for persons with disabilities, sir. for the partner that he's been to the ministry, sir, as we build out. But just like he has done it, sir, as I close, I call on all Barbadians to make real for all Barbadians the promise of Barbados, sir. And that does not happen by allowing some people to prosper and others to not prosper. It does not happen, sir, by allowing what is occurring now for persons with disabilities to continue. This is our country. And at the end of the day, as I said before, none of us will prosper, sir, if we allow some of us to fail. Sir, I wish to thank you, sir, for allowing us.
All member for Christchurch East.
Sir, I beg the suspension of this chamber until 1:45 for lunch.
The question that this honorable chamber be suspended until 1:45 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 1:45 p.m.